Okay.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. Well, welcome everybody to the Profoundly group chat. I'm thrilled to introduce our guest today, Brendan Tolleson, co-founder and CEO at RevPartners, an elite HubSpot Solutions partner, known, I think it's fair to say, Brendan, for its rapid growth. Before launching RevPartners, Brendan built a partner channel from 0 to 150 million, I think it was, Brendan, at Sunniva, and led major partner initiatives at QA Symphony and elsewhere. So, in other words, he's been in the trenches, he's seen it, and he's thrived. So today we're going to dive deep on Brendan's journey on starting, growing, and scaling a fast-moving partner organization. So if you're looking to learn more from someone who's really walked the walk there, Brendan's your person to learn that from, and you're in the right place. So let's get started. Brendan, welcome. Thanks for joining us here.
Well, I appreciate it. That was a very kind introduction. So don't go read my LinkedIn post from today, because it would actually say the exact opposite of that, which is basically I don't know what I'm doing. So there's probably a half truth in between what Brian said and what I just said. But happy to be here, happy to share anything, answer any questions you guys have. This is a really fun opportunity for me. I'd love to have these fireside type of chats. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. And humble to the core. So, Brendan, again, you have a remarkable track record. To kick things off, I shared a little bit about your background, but would you mind, for folks that might be new and sort of joining, sharing a little bit about how you got your start and kind of your journey?
Sure. So before I'll do the before RP. So most of my background is in VC-backed technology companies, and so Brian alluded to a few of those in the intro, which is Sunniva and in QA Symphony. Sunniva was in the renewable energy space, and then QA Symphony was in the software space. But really, the background is more on the sales and marketing side, and so really touching all phases of what you would think of traditional sales from a BDR, meaning hey, cold calling, cold email to secure appointments for the rep, to then moving into a sales role. And as Brian alluded to, most of that was on the channel side. And so we built the distribution channel for Sunniva, moved to the software space, and then really built out a different partnerships. But think about like value-added resellers, meaning reselling our software, but also how do we find partners that can implement our software and build a true service practice around our software, kind of similar to what RP is now today. And so that was a lot of my background. And then I moved into, right before RP, I moved into a tech-enabled service and a CRO capacity, where the company wanted to go from about 3 million to 25 million. This will get into your next question, I believe, Brian, but that's my background in terms of what I was doing prior to RP.
Got it. Got it. And I know we've gotten a lot of questions from folks in the community, like, what was the catalyst that inspired you to co-found RevPartners? Like, did you spot a particular gap in the market, or was there kind of a defining moment that, caused you to say, hey, this is the direction that I want to go in?
Yeah, it was a very clear moment. So what I would tell people, I tell every new RPer, I do a 3-part session for any new RPer that starts. And what I would share with them is the origin story of RP is not a romantic story. So what the origin story of RP is actually out of brokenness. And to be more specific, I lost my job. And so third week of March, when COVID first hit, when the world shut down, the CEO I was working for, was very concerned about what was going on in the market, understandably so. And so in spite of the fact that we had grown the business 140% year over year, he just said, hey, we really need to manage our costs. And so therefore, I need to let you go. And it was the same week that I got the tuition bill from my oldest daughter for school. So needless to say, it was a very bad week. And so I joke in the sense of like, it really is a romantic story. It was more out of force than it was a grand vision. I didn't intend to be like, entrepreneurship was something that I thought would be interesting, but I was forced into a role where I had to find a solution in light of the fact that I have 3 kids, the tuition bill, a mortgage to pay, et cetera. And there's a lot more of that story in terms of how we launched RP, but that's like the catalyst for what got RP moving in a direction to where it became to what it is today.
Got it. Got it. Well, a lot of good came out of that moment. So
Yeah.
excited, excited you're here. And it's in that moment, I'm curious, like, how you decided to kind of take the leap to do your own thing and like kind of
Yeah.
think about starting a partner organization versus like, you know, applying for other jobs or even going solo? Like, did you always envision building out a full scale team, or was it something that kind of evolved over time?
I mean, I'd be lying if I said yes. I think the framework that I would allude to is there's will plus way times timing. And so the will, where you just alluded to in terms of I needed to find a source of income. The way gets more into what we decided to build, and the way was the way that we got to the way. That's a very redundant statement, but I was getting approached by a lot of executives who said, "Hey, this idea of digital transformation was a nice to have." But now it's a must-have, meaning now that COVID has hit and I can't do trade shows, I don't have access to people that I know. How do I expand my reach? And so you have this playbook that you've built at these different companies that allows us to expand beyond our networks. Can you come help us? And that led to coaching engagements, which maybe some of the folks in the Profoundly space are doing more in that fractional capacity. So that's really where RP got started was, hey, we can be more of that coach and consultant to think through strategy. And then my co-founder, who some of you may know because he's pretty prolific in the HubSpot ecosystem, Matt Bullion, he was doing more of what's known as RevOps now at an employer, and he said, "Hey, the strategy is really great, but what if we marry the strategy with the execution at the CRM level, so that we operationalize those go-to-market approaches inside the CRM?" And so that's where we started to see that there's this opportunity in the market that's not being served today. Because when we started RP about 4 or 5 years ago, whatever that is now, RevOps was still a very nebulous term. And so we saw this as a really, a unique opportunity to capture market share, to define a category and to really attack it. So that gets into the way, or excuse me, yeah, the will and the way and the timing. The timing gets into HubSpot. And so we were just I would not say that we knew that HubSpot was going to become what it became. That would be a ridiculous statement. We just knew we didn't want to do Salesforce, not because Salesforce is bad, but because we knew we wanted to differentiate and have something that we could build a platform, scale services around. So what's a platform that would allow us to grow? So that's really kind of the three ingredients.
That's awesome. And I know it will land on soft ears with our community. We've got a lot of coaches and folks in the ecosystem that will appreciate your origin story there for sure.
Yeah.
As you were kind of growing the organization, like I know one thing that's top of mind for everyone is demand, right? And I think the typical playbook is to lean into leveraging your personal network and so on for those first deals. But there are a lot of folks in the community that are looking to scale beyond their sort of personal networks. And I'm curious, when you were getting started with RP, how did you kind of move past that sort of first group to kind of scale the playbook for reaching new customers?
Yeah, I think it's to your point, the logical place to start is people and then that's where a lot of people get stuck. And for us, we had I would say there are a few things. There are two primary sources for us as related to go to market. There was the channel source play, and so as Brian mentioned earlier, a lot of my background is in the partnership. So how do we build effective partnerships? And that for us, that was in the VC private equity space as well as the HubSpot space. So we really attacked those angles really hard. And the second one was really in the brand. And so we made a lot of noise, and we were very loud. And there's this idea of how do you be a red X and a sea of black X's. And so the idea is like, how do you find that when I say prolific zone, it's don't be crazy with what you say, but also don't be vanilla. And so how do you have a point of view that you can take to market that really cuts through the noise and drives engagement? I may not agree with you, but I'm willing to have a conversation. So for example, I just told you earlier, Salesforce is not a bad tool, but we went after Salesforce extremely hard and talked about how HubSpot is the CRM platform for scaling companies. That may not be controversial now, but I can guarantee you 4 years ago, that was not a statement that was well received in the market, but it was a fun one to cut through the noise and create a reaction.
Yeah, makes sense. A question for you. Obviously, HubSpot's doing amazing things, new releases all the time. How do you all stay agile? Like, how do you get your sort of service delivery team across all of those major updates and announcements as they sort of evolve the roadmap and your service model and so on. How do you handle that?
Yeah, it's pretty overwhelming to say the least, given the pace at which HubSpot moves, as you know. Um, I think this gets into really two elements. I think this question, but also probably something that people really struggle with is how do I scale my services organization without compromising quality? And the way we've addressed both of those kind of core components of, hey, how do I make sure I stay up to speed on the software, but also make sure my services are able to maintain at a high quality. What we did is we created a center of excellence. And so that sits in the middle in between our corporate, meaning our sales and marketing, and our, what I call our delivery, your traditional like delivery model. And so what the playbooks team does is they serve as a glue. And they do they do a lot of things, but to dumb it down, one is they make sure that they stay informed on the HubSpot product stack.
Mm,
And so Shadab, who some of you may know in the HubSpot ecosystem, he really is responsible for keeping on top of the product roadmap. And in fact, he shares a lot of that on LinkedIn. So if you don't follow him, he's a great follow. But what we do is we have a monthly review with the entire organization. He documents all the things that we should know about and make sure that that gets disseminated amongst the organization so that our strategists are up to speed on the software component. I can go to the services now, or Brian, if you want to tease that out, I'm happy to go into how the playbooks team helps from a quality perspective as well.
no, I think people would love to dive deep. I know we're a little short on time, so I might move us on because I think you raised an interesting point there. Like, I noticed recently that you've established a partnership with Clay. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Now, there are a lot of awesome opportunities out there in the ecosystem, Clay being one, but you can't do all of them. So I'm curious if you could share with the community, like, how do you go about deciding when to establish a new partnership like that? How do you go about it? And like, how do you establish those services before maybe you have that initial demand, or maybe you do?
Yeah, I think it starts with what are we trying to become. So I think that foundationally it needs to fit inside the narrative.
Mm,
And so for us, we want to become the global services provider for the CRO and HubSpot. So like that's the statement. Now, from a service line perspective, for us to be able to accomplish that, we need to have service lines from lead to cash, so the entire customer journey.
mm,
Currently, we focus primarily on, or what we've been known for, is that revenue operations for scaling companies on HubSpot. So that gives us that foundational layer for the data model. But if we really want to serve that CRO, we need to be able to not only display and showcase the data insights, but we need to be able to effectuate change. And so, yes, you can do that through efficiency gains, et cetera. But there's also this element of how do we increase, or one example would be how do we increase force, meaning how do we drive more demand for our customers? And so that's kind of what started that conversation. Now, who do you pick as it relates to that type of service line? I think there are a few things that we consider. One is like momentum, like meaning, are they a fast growing company that gives us opportunity to grow with them? So that's one
mm,
consideration. The second consideration for us is, do they have a priority or stated objective for HubSpot? Because if it's not, then that's a distraction for us. The third would get into co-marketing receptivity. So you asked earlier, Brian, about our willingness to, or how do we grow? We do a lot from a marketing perspective. And so we want to make sure that we have not only a partner, but one that's willing to co-market with us so we can grow together. And the fourth gets into the services arm. Software commission is always nice. And that's great for a lot of the small businesses that you can build. This is not a shot. Like there's a huge path for like the lifestyle type business, but for us to scale and to become that global service provider for the CRO and HubSpot, we need to know that we can build a service around that product. And so Clay represents really not scratched, but check all four of those boxes for us to say,
yeah.
hey, that's the one we're gonna go all in on. I guess the fifth one would be, is there a gap currently in their ecosystem? And we just saw that there are a lot of partners in that ecosystem that are doing more traditional prospecting, but there are very few that are saying, hey, really the key ingredient is not only how do I do outbound or inbound well, but how do I actually integrate that into the CRM to drive those insights? So that's ultimately what led us to go in on Clay.
That's awesome. There's a lot of love in the chat for Clay and on Slack. So good choice, I think, is the general consensus I'm getting off of my other screen over here.
Okay,
Um,
yeah.
Cool. Well, Brendan, I know we've got a few minutes left, and I want to leave time for questions from the group. One last question for you. You know, Profoundly is a community of really talented, independent, individual contributors and professionals, right? Freelancers and solopreneurs, lots of extraordinary expertise here. Um, does Rev Partners ever tap into that sort of talent for project or for roles?
I would say the answer, like, we're always looking for talent. I think that's the first statement I'll mention. I'll just say this: our preference is to have full-time people because of probably the reasons that make sense. Is like, hey, we want to have continuity, we want to invest in our people, and we want to create mobility for our people. Now, there are always going to be exceptions to that, and what I would say is where we would see a lot of value in it profoundly is like I think there's idea of like flex, meaning there's always going to be, not always is a strong word, but there's going to be times when demand exceeds supply. And so having that ability to flex with us is really attractive. The second is when it gets into specialization. And so we're not going to be able to train and standardize for every use case. And so where there gets into specialty, whether it's on the product or on like competency, like for example, design, I'll just use that as one. Like if you're a great designer, then we'd probably say, hey, we need to talk. Or if hey, you have industry or excuse me, you have experience in this specific integration, like that, those type of use cases get pretty interesting to us.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, this is awesome, Brendan. Let me pause there. I've got so many other questions, but I know I want to give the group an opportunity as well. The Profoundly team, if there are any questions that you have, feel free to come off mute and start your camera and have a chance to ask Brendan. Hey, Peter.
Hey, yeah, actually, I have a question, Brendan. Like I was actually looking on the Rev Partners side as well when you mentioned about, let's say the wider tools that plug into it all. How do you manage that for your customers? I mean, do you go in and do let's say, even the acquisition, like the buying of the tool? Do you or do you have your own instance that you then open up for those customers? Or like, for example, Clay, you can do things in so many ways, right? And I could imagine and I know also what they're building on and building all these different workspaces. So curious how you work with that.
So happy to answer that. Our website is about to be updated like on Friday. That's soft launch, so it'll be updated. I guess really on Monday of next week. But the answer to your question, Peter, is I'll answer it two ways. There's current state and there's future state. I think to your Clay is such a shiny object, and everyone's kind of trying to figure it out. Here's how we're solving it today. We are looking at it more as like how do you do I'll call it all bound in a box, meaning like how do we create a select group of tools that we can package up and deploy on behalf of our customers. And so that's how we think about it, that we have a curated list that we've handpicked for different functions within this play. Now, how do we, in terms of billing, we do all the work for the customer, and we put their billing information because I think it's a better experience for the customer, and I think it's a better experience for the software provider. Now that can change over time, but that's how we're currently attacking it. Is we do all the vendor selection, we do all the execution, and then the billing we have that directly through, or we pass that through from the customer to the vendor.
Smart. Nice. Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thanks, Peter. Any other questions from the community? If you have a question, just start your camera, come off mute, and you can ask Brendan. I've got a question for you, Brendan. When you were starting up RP, I'm sure there were moments that were like total panic mode, right? Can you share, was there a moment where, it was panic mode and what happened? Any stories from the trenches there?
besides the fact that my wife didn't want us to start it, and I took a 50% pay cut to get it going, and not knowing month to month if we were going to survive. Uh, I mean, there are lots of, and that's just the world that you live in if you're doing the startup. It's like you're crazy. All those kind of things are true. I mean, I think one story, I'll share a story of failure, because I think there's the view that everything worked. That's really not true. When we, it's kind of ironic because we're talking about clay right now, but one of the things that, when you're getting started, not only are you working your networks, but you're also saying yes to anything and everything that people ask you to do. And that's a big mistake. I'll just say that. So you really want to understand, yes, you need to have like the at-bats and the experience to say, hey, this is really what I want to focus on. But when we were first getting started, it was like, we'll do anything and everything you ask us to do. And so we tried prospecting back in the day, and we did not do it very well. And another failure would be, when I told you guys that we didn't it wasn't some like crystal ball that we knew where HubSpot was going. We actually tried to, we tried to build the business on ActiveCampaign originally, which was a colossal failure, to the point where we had to say hey, customer, I'm sorry, we'll actually pay to move you out of ActiveCampaign onto HubSpot. That was a really bad decision. But so that's probably ActiveCampaign would be a good one, where just to tell everyone, yes, we ended up going to HubSpot. Yes, it was the best decision we made, but there were a lot of bumps and bruises to get to where we are. And those are just two examples of the HubSpot, or excuse me, ActiveCampaign, and trying to do prospecting when we really weren't ready from an infrastructure perspective to do it.
Yeah. Any, as we're wrapping up here, any words of advice for folks that are out there, either thinking about starting their own thing or trying to grow a partner organization?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's the, I think COVID has changed a lot of things. And so I think that there is this idea of being able to manage multiple things, meaning have a job, have a side job. And I would just caution that, only in the sense of not because I think it's necessarily bad. I think it's bad for your soul. And so I would just say plant roots and attack, meaning if you want to build a business, by all means go after it. And there's this idea that we were talking about entrepreneur when Matt and I were first getting started, and he just said, have you burned the ships yet? And the burn the ships, some of you may have heard of that, but it's like the Cortez, who was, I think this is in Mexico, but literally when they got to the island, they burned the ships, and it's like, we're here, we're not going back. And it's just that idea that we're going to go all in and we're going to attack. And I think it's really good from a just mindset perspective. And I think it just allows you to focus. And so I was guilty of it, and I'm sure it's scary for a lot of folks. But that would be my one advice is, if you're going to do it, go all in. Because I think you get too distracted if you don't try it that way.
That's awesome. Great advice. I love it. Well, Brendan, thank you so much for joining the Profoundly group chat here. Great words of wisdom for everybody. What's the best way for folks to connect with you to kind of follow along? Is it LinkedIn or?
Yeah, I'd say LinkedIn is probably where I'm most active. I mean, you're welcome to email me, which I'd be happy to chat there, or Slack. I would say is the lowest on the list in terms of from a community perspective, but LinkedIn and email. LinkedIn is just my name. Email is btolleson, so first initial last name at revpartners.io. Either way, I'd be happy to engage.
Awesome. Sounds great. Thanks so much for joining, Brendan.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.